So I'm usually very cautious about going to see Marvel movies, especially after Deadpool 3, which was supposed to be a really hard franchise to mess up, but actually to my surprise, Captain America Brave New World was a little bit better than I had initially thought. That being said, it still has plenty of problems, so let's get right into the preliminary hearing. First and foremost, I have a slight problem with Steve Rogers being essentially race swapped. In all fairness, Anthony Mackie is a good actor and used to be pretty likable. And I mean, Falcon is cool. Him and Steve had a good relationship in the Infinity Saga. So I think the setup on the MCU side was pretty good. But in this day and age, when the concept of race swapping is so concentrated, it's just something I can't really ignore. When it comes to superhero comics, especially Marvel, I have this ruling that anything that came out during or after 2014 shouldn't be canon in the MCU because 2014 is around that year when the culture wars really started and wokeness started to make its way into the comic book industry. And all the hardcore Marvel comic book fans know that Sam Wilson replaced Steve Rogers as Captain America in the year 2015. And only after 4 years, just 4 years, Disney and Marvel Studios decided that it was time to race swap the white guy with a man that has no superhero powers at all. But anyways, imagine if Chadwick Boseman died and Agent Ross replaced him as Black Panther. Imagine if Wonder Woman was replaced by Steve Trevor. I have a feeling that the other side would have a little bit of a problem with that too. And I know someone's gonna say, that makes it sound like America only represents white people or that Captain America is a white man's superhero. But I'm not just talking about heroes that exclusively represent one identity. If War Machine or Ironheart or Miles Morales, who's essentially just a replacement of Peter Parker, or hell, even Falcon, were replaced by white people, everyone would lose their minds and start boycotting Disney. We all know it. To make this matter worse, Anthony Mackie, the actor who plays Cap in this movie, said recently that, quote, Captain America represents a lot of different things, and I don't think the term, America should be one of those representations. And a lot of shills are going to say, oh, well, Chris Evans said the same thing over a decade ago. You're just a racist. But here's the thing. Chris Evans was explaining why the character is named Captain America. And that's because at the time, America was at war with Germany. And all Americans, not half of Americans, all Americans had one common enemy at the time. Mackey's statement, unlike Evans, singles out half of Americans. Either way you look at it, either way it goes, it singles out half of Americans. That's the difference for anyone who's wondering. I hate it when actors say something political and then follow it up by saying, I'm so tired of all the political jousting. Even though most people agree that Captain America over the years has become more and more political throughout his stories and movies. Anyways, the movie also stars Harrison Ford, a man who was able to stay out of politics for, 64 years up until now. What a shame. The movie is rated PG-13 as usual. The runtime is 118 minutes, and the budget as of this video is $180 million. And I've only ever seen trailers in theaters, so where the hell did all that money go? And then just a quick synopsis. This is from IMDb. Sam finds himself in the middle of an international incident after meeting with President Thaddeus Ross. He must soon discover the reason behind a nefarious global plot before the true mastermind has the entire world seeing red. Wow, how unique. Give me anything other than just a generic superhero movie storyline. Let's talk about the trailers for a second. The trailers are pretty vague. More specifically, they just beat around the bush really hard. Again, I couldn't sit in my judge's chair and tell you right now what the story was about. Even people in the comment sections of the trailers were talking about how concerning it is that the official trailer doesn't elaborate much on the teaser trailer. Even still, the trailers advertise a completely different story than what was actually in the movie. The main villain in the movie is only featured like once or twice in the trailers, and it's still really easy to miss, so it's really just playing around with false advertising a little bit. What I was able to gather at the time is that the president wants to join forces with Sam, but Sam is super hesitant, and after some attack on the US, Sam is caught in the crossfire of conflict. And I thought that Giancarlo Esposito was the main villain, but it could also be the president as Red Hulk. Again, it's not clear. I feel like modern day trailers have just lost all of their spirit. They used to be trailers that would give you a specific plot synopsis without telling you too much about the story, but at the same time explaining why it's unique, why you should go buy a ticket and drive to go see the movie. Nowadays, they're just like flashy, over the top dramatic, $1 million trailers that could give a shit about selling you the story. Alright, now that I've said everything I feel about the movie going into it, as always, this will be the one and only spoiler warning. If you want my final verdict spoiler free, skip to this time in the video. So we open with Sam as the new Captain America and his sidekick who is replacing him as the Falcon. His name is Joaquin Torres. They're interrupting a deal that's about to take place, the package being a canister of adamantium. The seller is Sidewinder, who's played by Giancarlo Esposito. Sam and Joaquin are able to retrieve the canister and the Sidewinder gets away. Then we're introduced to President Thaddeus Ross, who's looking to sign a deal between the US and several other nations to have joint ownership over an adamantium island in the Indian Ocean, also known as Celestial Island. We're then introduced to Isaiah Bradley from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, who's basically just the black Captain America. His story is suspiciously identical to Steve Rogers in the first Avenger, except while Steve was rewarded for his heroics, Isaiah was imprisoned, which I actually liked that idea at first in the comics, but of course Disney and Marvel had to take that and make a modern day political statement with it. You guys all know what I'm talking about. Sam, Joaquin, and Isaiah are invited to the White House where President Ross is giving a presentation on adamantium with the joint nations leaders in attendance. During the presentation, Isaiah and a few other members from the audience have their minds corrupted following a very specific song that plays. Isaiah gets a hold of a gun and shoots at the president, and chaos erupts. The president comes out unharmed, and Isaiah manages to escape the White House. He runs a few blocks away, and then he's stopped, and then we just get the most heartbreaking image of 3 white cops arresting this poor black man who did absolutely nothing at all, right? But in all seriousness, am I supposed to feel bad for this guy? I mean, I understand that he has this hate boner for the US government and he didn't willingly shoot at the president, but I mean, what do you expect the cops to do in that situation when you shoot at the president? Do you just expect him to let you go? Of course they're going to arrest him. Sam talks to the president, says he wants to investigate why Isaiah might have done this. The president says he's a conflict of interest and that sort of thing, which in real life he absolutely would be a conflict of interest. So Sam takes matters into his own hands and investigates the situation with Joaquin. Sam gets ambushed by the Sidewinder. Sam stops him, and then he presumably gives custody to a Navy SEAL team he's close with. Sam and Joaquin investigate an old black site where we're introduced to the real villain of the story, the leader, who is also known as Samuel Stearns, the same guy who tried to help Bruce Banner with the Hulk cure. We learn that the leader was the buyer of the adamantium, but it was just a fake deal to make it look like the US was stealing adamantium from Japan. The leaders of the partner nations are a little bit hesitant to sign the treaty due to them being put in danger while at the White House presentation, but decide to sign only if Japan is on board. So President Ross visits Japan, but the Prime Minister still doesn't trust the US. The Japanese deploy their navy to Celestial Island, and likewise the US Navy does the same thing. Throughout the movie, we see President Ross start to become more and more aggressive. Obviously, there's something wrong with his health and he's becoming more and more evil. Sam negotiates with Sidewinder for more info, and then that's just the end of Sidewinder. We don't ever really see him again throughout the movie. We learn that the leader is similar to Bruce Banner in that his body has been exposed to extreme gamma radiation, but instead of gaining immense physical strength, he gains immense mental strength, being able to solve really complex math problems like in an instant, like it's mental math. Sam manages to board the Navy ship that the president is on. He talks to the president and convinces him that the leader is behind everything, but the president actually already knows this because he used to be in really bad health, and he forced the leader to develop a medicine that could keep him alive. While both the US Navy and the Japanese Navy converge on Celestial Island, the leader corrupts 2 of the US Navy pilots and orders them to attack the Japanese Navy. President Ross orders Sam and Joaquin to go after those pilots while he tries to de-escalate the situation with the Japanese Prime Minister, but he won't admit that the leader is behind everything, so therefore the Japanese Prime Minister is still sus and doesn't trust him. The reason why he won't admit that the leader is behind it is because he still needs that supply train of medicine and doesn't want to throw the leader under the bus, presumably. Then we just get a really cool naval battle scene. Sam and Joaquin stop the rogue fighter jets, and the Japanese withdraw their defenses, but at the cost of Joaquin getting very seriously injured. We learn that the leader's motive for all this is that some years back he was subjected to torturous experiments that left his body discolored and deformed, especially his head, and he wants to be cured. President Ross promises to get him a cure if he continues to supply him medicine, but unfortunately that cure that he's talking about doesn't actually exist. So the leader is becoming impatient, so his goal is to destroy Ross's legacy. While Sam is visiting Joaquin in the hospital, Bucky actually stops by, and Sam complains about how Steve made the wrong decision to give him the shield right in front of Bucky too. And Bucky just disagrees and says that Steve made the right decision in giving Sam the shield. So there you go. There's another instance of them putting it on the books that Bucky didn't want the shield. All of you guys who used Bucky's disinterest in inheriting Cap's shield as evidence for why Cap gave Sam the shield are just honestly kind of pathetic. Oh, he expressed that he didn't want the shield, so why would Cap give it to him? First of all, to my knowledge, he expressed his disinterest after the events of Endgame. And secondly, you're not understanding that using evidence from one MCU installment to justify controversial decisions in a different MCU installment is sort of a conflict of interest. Of course, Marvel Studios is going to find a way to justify something that people didn't like in their installments. Oh, well, Bucky was just tired of fighting. He didn't want to fight anymore. He was tired of all the years of brainwashing and just didn't want to fight anymore. That's kind of interesting because there's a movie coming out in 3 months and Bucky's in it and he's fighting. Okay. Anyways, while Cap is back in DC, he's confronted face to face with the leader, and he just monologues like a stereotypical villain. It was kind of cringy. We learned that President Ross's medicine actually has a lot of gamma radiation in it, so while he's giving a press conference discussing the Indian Ocean incident with the Japanese, he starts to turn into Red Hulk. He breaks out of his clothes, and you get the scene that you saw in the trailer. We get a brief yet still action-packed fight scene between Sam and Red Hulk. Eventually, Sam sort of defeats Red Hulk and then talks him back down to his human form, back into President Ross. And then the leader and President Ross both get thrown in the Raft prison. President Ross ultimately decided to take accountability for all of his actions and serve his sentence and just let the country heal. Isaiah gets released and credits roll. Then in the post-credits scene, Sam talks to the leader at the raft, and the leader alludes to another alien invasion or some sort of multiversal invasion. Okay, so like I said earlier, I didn't hate the movie as much as I thought I would. The story was okay. The action, it's obviously a Marvel movie. It was pretty good, even though I think the 3D kind of pulled me out of the immersion a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the ending while it's fresh in my mind. As far as the story goes, I just think it stopped short and was just a little bit messy. The leader is the main villain in this movie, at least that's what I got, but the way the movie begins, it makes it seem like Sidewinder is going to be the villain, But then the way the movie ends, it makes it seem like Red Hulk is supposed to be the villain, but neither of them are the villain. It's really the Sidewinder, but it's just hard to make someone who's not that powerful physically into a villain. So I understand that, but you still got to do better than that. You need to do better, Senator. So all that being said, it felt like, the usual conquering of the villain at the end of the film just isn't earned because the leader just straight up gets arrested and there's not as much dramatic tension for Red Hulk as much as I would have liked, at least. Another thing too, the whole point of Sam aggressively trying to get to the bottom of everything is so that he can prove Isaiah Bradley's innocence. But that moment never really happens where he gets to prove to everyone that he's innocent. It just kind of happens off camera and everyone just assumes he's innocent, which he obviously is. So it's kind of a wasted opportunity for Marvel to justify Isaiah's existence in the movie, because honestly, I think it's another case where if you remove him from the story, you don't lose anything of value, or you can still at least write the story without him in it. As far as the lore goes, it's obvious that Sam is going to be the leader of the Avengers in the next few movies, but as Captain America, I really don't see it. It really didn't feel like a Captain America movie, especially not like Winter Soldier, which is what it seemed like it was aspiring to be like. It really just felt like a sequel to The Incredible Hulk, but with Sam Wilson as the main character. The purpose of this movie was to convince us that Sam Wilson should be the new Captain America, but again, it doesn't work. I really don't see a scenario in which anyone else except for Steve Rogers is Captain America, but I mean, if you have to give the shield to someone, I think it should be Bucky. Falcon, he already has these advanced armored wings. He really doesn't need a shield. I think it's just Bucky would use it more effectively, and there's just more of a case to be made with him. I mean, honestly, I just don't think that this should have been a Captain America movie. I think it should have been a Falcon movie. I think Steve Rogers passing down the shield is just it kind of gave me an icky feeling when I saw it. It wasn't too bad at the time, but now seeing what it's turned out as, I just don't like that idea. I think it just should have been called Falcon. I also want to talk about the branding because, like I said earlier, it's borderline just false advertising. The trailers, the posters, the promotions all make it seem like Red Hulk and Sidewinder would be the major villains in the story. But Sidewinder couldn't have been in the movie for more than 15 minutes, and the fight scene between Sam and Red Hulk it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. So it's pretty obvious that they relied heavily on those two characters to make an insane amount of revenue to justify the insane budget of this movie. Which, by the way, I don't know. I heard somewhere that the budget is not $180 million. I heard it was like $400 million or something like that. And that Marvel is pretty good at just making up numbers. But that's just speculation. I won't count that against the movie. Okay, politics. It's not great. I will say that they did dial it back from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which at the time was probably the most transparent piece of political propaganda in the entire MCU. But in this movie, it's still not great either. Okay, so Isaiah Bradley, let's start with him. His whole character is basically politicized for the MCU and this movie. His appeal is that he faced institutional racism and then he was acquitted some like 40 years ago. So him being arrested for shooting at the literal president of the United States is a moral bad, and it's him experiencing the same thing he did decades ago, even though the two things are completely different. Like, for example, they put him in solitary confinement for his own protection, but he's like too stupid to understand that it's for his protection, so he starts complaining about it. And then, like I said earlier, he has this huge hate boner for his country. When they get invited to DC and they're driving through DC, he calls it the belly of the beast, even though Washington, DC is one of the most progressive cities in the entire country. Oh, and then there's also this character named Ruth, better known as Sabra for all you comic book fans. She's this small, petite woman who easily takes out men twice her size, and in one scene, she even takes out more men than Sam and Joaquin combined, I think. I understand that she probably has some sort of training, but they don't explain that in the movie. Like, in Black Widow and the way her character is set up, they actually flesh out her ability and how she's able to accomplish all she can. They don't do that with this character, and I think that's sort of a problem. And then there's this scene where she gets offended when a prison guard offers her an escort while she's in this military prison, and she just looks at him like, I think I can handle myself. Like, yeah, fuck that guy for thinking that a small, petite woman may be in danger in a military prison. Definitely not a Mary Sue. There's also a few subtle hints of propaganda in the movie, like the head of President Ross's security detail is this short black woman. And then in one scene, Sam says the country is lost. And then in another scene, the Japanese prime minister says, America always takes what it wants. And I know they're just kind of talking about the lore and just the story in general, but those two lines, especially the second one, doesn't fully come off that way. I think that there was better ways to write those lines without trashing on America so much. Anyways, the acting was good. The dialogue was average. The story was entertaining if you're not like a huge Marvel fanatic. Me personally, for example, I like movies that involve like the government and especially the president. So I think overall those supposed reshoots that the media was talking about did kind of pay off if those rumors were true. So that was the movie Captain America Brave New World. For my final verdict, I will be ruling in favor of this movie with 58%. I had low expectations for this movie, meaning I had very high standards, and considering the mark that Marvel Studios needs to make with these movies following Endgame, I just really don't think that this movie hit that mark. Now, should you go see it? Should you rent it, or rather wait until it's on Disney Plus, or just not watch it at all? See, the thing is Marvel movies recently, it seems like the fans just aren't as hyped for it and are more increasingly okay with waiting until it comes out on Disney Plus. So I would just second that and say it's worth waiting until it's streaming, because it is worth the watch. It is an entertaining story, I will say. Now, to their credit, Marvel Studios did definitely improve with the story of this film over previous films, especially Deadpool 3. I was really disappointed by that movie, and from then on out, I was just super cautious going into anything Marvel MCU. So if they continue to improve their movies, I will suggest going to see them more often. But anyways, if you like this review and you want to see more, click the like and subscribe button, and I'll try to get more reviews out as soon as the movies come out. But that's all for this case. This court's adjourned.